Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and today we're going to continue our Clone Wars history series. We are in the third year of the war. Now before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe and notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our coverage. In our last episode, we took a look at the Mon Cala Civil War. Today we'll be looking at a different civil war on a different planet that has very similar problems. Two local species that just can't seem to get along. Chapter 6, Naboo and Gungan Tension. Located in the mid-rim of the galaxy, Naboo was discovered, or maybe rediscovered, by humans pretty early on in galactic history. A group of human refugees from the core planet Griswold had crash-landed on Naboo back in the days before hyperdrives were a viable method of FTL travel. It used to take entire generations to travel from one star system to another, so these Griswold refugees who had just escaped a terrible war on their old home planet decided to settle down on Naboo. They didn't really have another choice. The planet was extremely beautiful and relatively uninhabited. The local species known as the Gungans first avoided contact with these humans and retreated to their hidden underwater kingdom. When the two sides finally met, diplomacy failed and the inevitable skirmishes started happening between these two groups of people. Neither the Griswold human colonists or the Gungans were an especially militarized society, and there was never a real push to eradicate the other side. Gradually, an uneasy and unofficial peace would settle down the fighting on the planet. The Gungans also mainly lived underwater, so that kind of helped. In legends, an ancient reptile race had invaded the planet and forced the Gungans to build massive cities underwater to escape slavery. The Gungans developed technologies to make life underwater safe and comfortable, and soon they fully adapted to it. This meant that although they shared a planet, the Naboo, as the humans were called, would rarely encounter these Gungans, and the two sides would rarely fight for the same resources as well. Now, Naboo's outer core was surrounded by a layer of plasma. This plasma throughout the course of the planet's history created many tunnels through the planet that made travel very quick and simple through the center of the planet. I would say safe, but there are giant sea monsters there. The Gungans eventually figure out how to use these passages so that they wouldn't need to come out of the water to travel across the planet. The plasma energy from the core would also be harnessed by both the Gungans and the Naboo as a cheap and bountiful energy source. And so instead of becoming vicious enemies, the Gungans and Naboo learned to live apart from one another. That was until the Naboo crisis occurred. Although Naboo had many natural beauties and was a very pleasant place to live with high living standards, it wasn't really considered a powerful planet or an important planet. It lacked any real industry or commerce and mainly served as an art, culture, and tourism center. Given the planet's low population and the treasury's low capital, the plasma reserves beneath Naboo were never fully exploited for export purposes. What Naboo desperately needed to jumpstart their economy were investors, mining companies, and also construction firms. Not only would the Naboo need to drill for the plasma, they would also need to refine the plasma and ship it somehow. The spaceport in Naboo's capital, Theed, wasn't even large enough to handle such a big industrial endeavor. Ultimately, the Naboo king Bon Topolo was approached by Damask Holdings, a shadow broker with links to the intergalactic banking clan. Damask Holdings was able to provide the resources necessary to start this massive mining project immediately, turning Naboo from a mid-rim world very few people visited to a major player in the galactic energy market. Of course, this now meant that Naboo was a part of this wider game of galactic domination, which would be bad for Naboo. Damask Holdings, the shadow broker who created the deal, was actually run by Darth Plagueis, the master of Darth Sidious. Years later, when the Galactic Senate passed Prop 3181-4D, it essentially erased the free trade zone that allowed organizations like the Trade Federation to take over massive expanses of the Outer Rim. And so the Trade Federation blockaded Naboo in protest and threatened to starve the planet until Prop 3181-4D was removed. In their moment of need, Queen Amidala of Naboo approached the Gungan king for help. She was able to convince their leader, Boss Nass, that the Separatist droid army would turn on the Gungans after they gained complete control of the surface of the planet. In return for their help, the Gungans would be uplifted as equal partners in governance of the planet. This included the appointment of a Gungan representative for Naboo in the Galactic Senate. The Gungans would fight nobly against the Separatist droid army during the war, and Queen Amidala would keep her word. The following decades would see an increase in trust and cooperation between these two groups of people. By the time the Clone Wars had started, the planet was pretty much united and very loyal to the Republic. As we mentioned in our last video, just weeks before the Gungan Royal Army had mobilized and deployed thousands of Gungan warriors to assist Mon Cala in their own civil war against the Korans. Jar Jar Binks had become an elected representative for the Gungans and Naboo. He was viewed as kind of a hero for his actions during the invasion of Naboo, and also one of the key reasons why the Gungans and Naboo were at peace, an arrangement that greatly benefited both sides. Jar Jar was a trusted member of Palpatine's inner circle. Palpatine had held Jar Jar's seat not too long ago, and most likely the two Dark Lords had an understanding between them. Whenever Palpatine needed something done, Jar Jar was there to convince the Gungan people to do it. The leader of the Gungans at the time was a male Gungan called Boss Leone. He was also quite pro-Republic and presented a challenge for the Separatist Alliance. After the Battle of Mon Cala, it was clear that the swamp creatures from Naboo were causing some major issues. The Gungans were too loyal and proud to betray the Republic, so instead, Count Dooku manages to slip in an operative into the King's High Council, an elderly Gungan by the name of Richelieu. Richelieu was well practiced in the mystical arts and manages to put a mind control necklace on Boss Leone. With the boss completely underneath his control, Richelieu started a very populist campaign championing war against their neighbors, the Naboo. The Gungans aren't exactly the most complicated people, and soon, Boss Leone's call for war is heard and spreads throughout the populace. Although Naboo seems like the more powerful faction on this planet, the Gungans actually outnumber the humans almost 3-1. Senator Banks witnesses this change within the populace, and he sends for Padme and Anakin Skywalker. Upon meeting Boss Leone, it becomes immediately noticeable that the boss is under some kind of mind control. Anakin immediately spots the source of the mind control and takes off the necklace around the boss's neck. Leone returns to his normal self. He tells the Republic envoys that his advisor Richelieu is the one who had given him the necklace. But when they arrive in Richelieu's dwelling, the advisor runs away and stabs Boss Leone, knocking him unconscious. The Republic envoys are running out of time. The Gungan army is already preparing to attack, and now Richelieu has appeared in front of that army claiming that the boss had died, and his last command was for the Gungans to attack the capital of Theed alongside Separatist droid forces. Yes, the same droids that only a decade before killed massive amounts of Gungans on the battlefield. It seems though that Boss Leone's populist message has already gathered tons of support, mainly based on lies about the Naboo. The Gungans were ready to retake their planet. It also should be noted that when the Gungans volunteered to assist the Mon Calamari in the civil war against the Separatist-backed Korans, the Republic were really careless with how they deployed their forces. Many Gungans died in the battle because of poor tactics and heavy enemy resistance. So it's not that surprising that many Gungans were angry at the Republic and were looking for some sort of revenge. The Republic envoys are running out of time. With Boss Leone incapacitated, there's no way they could counter Richelieu's order now, unless they were able to figure out how to wake up Boss Leone or maybe impersonate him. You see, Jar Jar Binks apparently looked like Boss Leone. He was also a powerful dark side force user with plenty of persuasion abilities thanks to the Force. And soon Jar Jar Binks was running around in front of the troops like Boss Leone and pointing fingers at Richelieu, who Jar Jar said had misled them all. The Gungan army quickly turns on Richelieu, forcing the advisor to flee once again. This time Anakin chases the advisor all the way back to his lair, where Count Dooku is waiting for him.
It's a trap!
Dooku quickly skewers Richelieu and engages Anakin in combat with the help of 4 of his Magna Guard droids. Although Anakin is far stronger this time around, he's still unable to beat the Count and gets shocked into submission by his guards. Dooku now has a very valuable prisoner in his possession. Meanwhile, back to the Gungan army. The invasion of the Naboo capital of Theed has been postponed, but a giant Separatist force has now landed as well. The Gungans and droids were supposed to march together to the city, and General Grievous was now here on the planet ready to lead the charge. Jar Jar, still disguised as the boss, tries to buy some time and stalls General Grievous with his usual nonsense. Meanwhile, the Gungan General Tarpal is outside shutting down the entire droid army, and he manages to finish just in time. Jar Jar continues to insist that the invasion of Theed is now cancelled and finally sets General Grievous off. The cyborg chases Jar Jar out of his command ship and finds his entire army deactivated. He now is surrounded by the Gungan army. The cyborg manages to kill General Tarpal, a veteran of the blockaded Naboo, but before the old Gungan dies, he manages to shock Grievous, which opens him up to more attacks from the other Gungan warriors. Now the Republic also has their own very valuable prisoner for exchange. Dooku contacts Padme, who he knows is involved with Anakin, and calls for an exchange between the Jedi General and Cyborg General. From a strategic point of view, Anakin is probably worth a little less than General Grievous. Although Anakin was a skilled fighter and a great leader, there were plenty of other Jedi who could fill his shoes. General Grievous, on the other hand, had no equals within the CIS. His capture could severely affect the Confederacy's abilities to wage war. Also, because of her relationship to Anakin, Padme probably should have excused herself from the negotiations and contacted the Republic government before negotiating with Separatists. But no, in the end, love wins. So there you have it, guys. That is the story of the Gungan Civil War. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you can stay tuned for our next episode. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.